Dear shorthand writers, this is English Shorthand Dictation number 166 and the dictation speed is 120 words per minute. Ready? Start. Sir, the duty on electricity is in principle a bad tax. I am one of those who believe that the use of electricity ought to be encouraged more and more, because in the absence of electricity people would use kerosene oil, which causes smoke, which is injurious to health, and that ought to be stopped in the best way possible. The only way to discourage the consumption of kerosene oil would be to make electricity as cheap as one can possibly make it. Therefore, my submission is that on general principles this is a bad duty. My second comment on this part of the taxation proposal is that it is a tax which is badly distributed. One of the most extraordinary things that one notices about this electricity tax is that there is no increase in the tax on the energy used by cinemas and theatres. Sir, I should have thought that if there was any individual tax, it was certainly on the cinema and the theatre. It is because if a tax was levied on the cinema or on the theatre, its burden would certainly be passed on to persons who go to theatres and to cinemas. That would be taxation on luxuries, and I am sure that instead of spreading the tax as the Honourable Finance Minister has done upon householders, if he had increased the rate upon cinemas and theatres, he would have got all the revenue that he intended to get out of this duty. With regard to the third item of taxation, which is stamp duty on conveyances, the increase is quite unjustified. In Bombay City, the Honourable Finance Minister proposes to increase the tax from 3% to 4%, which is an increase of more than 20% on the present basis. In Pune and Ahmedabad, he proposes a tax from 2% to 3%, which is also an increase of more than 20%. In other towns which are to be notified by the government, the tax is to be raised from 1% to 3%, which is an increase of more than 50%, and in the rest of the towns it is to be raised from 1% to 2%. Reading the Honourable Minister's statement of objects and reasons which is attached to the Finance Bill, I do not find any explanation as to the justification for the increase of this taxation. All that the Honourable Minister chooses to say is that it is considered desirable that the stamp duty for conveyances should be higher in urban areas than in rural areas. Why are the urban areas more sinful that they should be made to pay more than what they have been paying so far? We have had no answer from the Honourable Minister at all. It is a simple arbitrary act saying that the tax shall be increased without any rhyme or reason. Sir, now we come to the fifth proposal, that is the property tax. This, of course, is the crux of the whole taxing proposal. Now, this proposal, to my mind, is objectionable from the various points of view. My honourable friend has already pointed out one of the objections to this measure, that this government is now encroaching upon a basis of taxation which has hitherto been left for the municipal governments. The Bombay City Municipality derives a large part of its revenue from taxation on property. Not only the Bombay municipality derives its revenue from property tax, but similarly all the city municipalities are allowed to levy a tax upon property. Sir, this competition by the government into a field of taxation which is reserved for municipal bodies will prove greatly detrimental to the growth of local self-government. I will not say anything more on that point, but I will refer to certain other aspects of the proposal, and the first aspect is this. The tenants of the Bombay city have been carrying on an agitation that the rents in the city of Bombay are abnormal and that they should be reduced. Now, if the government by this measure of taxation is going to take away 10% of the value of the property, it should not in the same breath say to the landlord that he shall also reduce the rent of the tenants who have been agitating against the present high pitch of rent. Therefore, what the government is doing is really nothing more than defrauding the tenants of the Bombay city and similarly of Ahmedabad by taking away from them what was legitimately their due. I think that is certainly one of the most serious objections that can be urged to this measure. Secondly, this property, which is to be the subject matter of taxation under the government proposal, cannot be said to be property which is not subject to taxation now, nor can it be said that this is a property which has been lightly taxed and therefore can still bear a higher taxation. Let me take the case of Bombay city itself. The Bombay municipality levies on the whole 18% on the rateable value of the property for its own use. In addition to that, the owner of the house has to pay the ground rent if the property is a leasehold property. In addition to that, he has to pay income tax to the government of India on the income which he derives from the total rental of his property. Taken altogether, this burden would certainly come to about 23%. My honorable friend is saying that it would come to 50%. He will probably explain it later on. What I point out is that it cannot be said that this property is a lightly taxed property. It is a property which is already heavily taxed, and therefore it will be very unjust to impose upon it a further burden of 10%. The next thing that I should like to point out to the Honorable Finance Minister is this. He seems to treat this tax as though it was just a rate and not a tax. Well, I have a quarrel with him on that point. What he is levying is not a rate, but it is a tax. The difference between a rate and a tax is this. A rate is something for which you get specific service. We pay rates to the municipality because in return for what we pay to the municipality, we get direct services like water, conservancy, lighting, and various other services. It is really a charge for the services rendered. But in the case of what the Honorable Minister is doing, there are no services. Therefore, it is a tax. Although the Minister chooses to call it a tax on property, it is a tax on income, because I do like to tell him that nowhere things pay anything. In all ultimate analysis, it is the man who pays. Things do not pay. If men pay, they pay out of their income. Therefore, it is an income tax.